My name is Olivia, 34 years old, and I've always found solace in my garden, a vibrant oasis I've nurtured with unwavering dedication for the past 5 years. The scent of lavender mingles with the gentle hum of bees, a symphony that usually soothes my soul and quiets the chaos of my busy life. Today, however, I sit among the trampled petals and crushed stems, my heart heavy with a mix of frustration and disbelief. My neighbor, Helen, has transformed what should have been a joyous garden party into a scene of ruin. The laughter of my friends, the clink of wine glasses, the soft strumming of a guitar, all silenced by her spiteful interference. Mud clings to my hands as I survey the damage, my anger simmering like a pot about to boil over. Yet, beneath the rage, a seed of determination takes root. She may have ruined my day, but I'll cultivate a revenge that grows beyond her ability to control. My garden is more than a hobby, it's a labor of love that began when I moved into this house 5 years ago, seeking a fresh start after a grueling divorce. The backyard was a barren patch then, overrun with weeds and littered with debris from the previous owner. I spent weekends digging beds, my hands blistered from the shovel, planting roses, lavender, and a delicate row of daisies. I installed a small stone fountain, its trickle a meditative sound, and built a trellis for climbing jasmine. Each bloom, each green shoot, became a testament to my patience and resilience, a sanctuary where I could escape the demands of my job as a senior editor at a local magazine. The garden grew with me, mirroring my recovery, vibrant and strong, a reflection of the life I'd rebuilt. Helen moved in next door 2 years ago, a woman in her late 40s with a sharp tongue and an even sharper glare. Her arrival marked the end of my peaceful coexistence with neighbors. At first, her complaints were petty: my morning radio was too loud, my hedge cast too much shade on her pristine lawn. She once called the council about my compost heap, insisting it attracted rats, though I'd never seen a single one, my setup meticulously maintained. I tried to smooth things over, offering her cuttings from my prize roses or a jar of homemade jam, but her scowl only deepened, her lips curling as if my kindness was an insult. Her house, a mirror image of mine across the fence, became a fortress of judgment, her curtains always twitching with her watchful eyes. The garden party was my celebration, a milestone marking my recent promotion to senior editor after years of freelancing. The role came with a raise and the chance to shape the magazine's direction, a dream I'd chased since my early days writing travel pieces. I invited a dozen close friends, colleagues, old schoolmates, and my supportive sister, Mia, planning a buffet with homemade quiches, fresh salads, and a lemon cake I'd baked at dawn. I strung fairy lights across the patio, their warm glow promising a magical evening, and set out blankets for a stargazing session. The weather cooperated, a golden afternoon with a gentle breeze, the garden in full bloom, a picture-perfect scene. Helen's house loomed over the fence, and I caught her peering out, her silhouette framed by her window. I brushed it off, focusing on my guests' laughter as they admired the roses. Halfway through, the chaos erupted. Her sprinkler system blasted to life, a sudden deluge that soaked my guests, the food, and the delicate fairy lights, which sputtered out. The water carried a foul odor, likely a mix of fertilizer and something rancid, turning my pristine lawn into a muddy swamp. Friends gasped, grabbing coats and umbrellas, their shoes squelching as they fled. Mia helped me move the buffet inside, her face a mix of anger and pity. I looked up to see Helen at her window, smirking, her arms crossed as if conducting a symphony of destruction. The party dissolved, my celebration reduced to a soggy memory, the garden's beauty marred by her spite. I rushed to the fence, turning off the water valve on my side, but the damage was irreversible. Guests left, apologizing, their voices drowned by the dripping mess. I confronted Helen, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. "Why would you do this?" I demanded, standing at the property line. She leaned out, her smirk unwavering. "Your noise bothered me." "Consider it a lesson in consideration," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. Her casual cruelty cut deep, and I retreated, fuming, the weight of her words lingering. The garden, my sanctuary, was a battlefield, muddy patches where roses once thrived, the fountain clogged with debris, petals scattered like fallen soldiers. I cleaned late into the night, the silence amplifying my resolve. Armed with a flashlight, I scrubbed mud from the patio, salvaged what flowers I could, and drained the fountain, my hands raw from the effort. The quiet gave me space to think, to plan. She thinks she's won, dismissing me as a pushover, but I'll turn this into her undoing. I started plotting, my mind racing with possibilities. I reviewed local bylaws on my phone, discovering her sprinkler misuse might violate noise and nuisance codes. Her system had run for over an hour, well beyond permitted times. I took photos of the damage, timestamped each shot, and captured her smug expression through the window, a digital record of her malice. My friend Mark, a landscaper with a keen eye for detail, visited the next day. He suggested documenting soil contamination if the fertilizer was toxic, a legal angle I hadn't considered. I collected samples in small jars, my hands dirty but determined, labeling each with the date and time. I also recalled her past grievances, petitions to the neighborhood association about my dog's non-existent barking, complaints about my outdoor lights. This wasn't her first strike, it was a pattern. I contacted the association, submitting a formal complaint about the sprinkler incident, attaching my evidence. The secretary, Mrs. Patel, promised a review, her tone sympathetic. At work, I channeled my anger into a feature article on neighborhood disputes, weaving in my experience without naming Helen. I described a fictional garden party ruined by a neighbor's spite, the words flowing as therapy. The editor, impressed by its raw emotion, published it online, where it went viral. Comments flooded in, some recognizing Helen's reputation from past feuds, her loud parties, her feud with the mailman. I didn't gloat, but the support emboldened me. I visited Mark again, asking about legal options. You could sue for property damage, he said, but a quieter revenge might hit harder, something that grows over time. His words sparked an idea, a plan that would flourish beyond her reach. I decided to escalate subtly. I planted fast-growing ivy along our shared fence, its tendrils already creeping upward, knowing it would encroach on her side if she didn't maintain it, perfectly legal, yet a constant irritation. I also started a community garden project, rallying neighbors for a shared plot, deliberately excluding Helen. The first meeting drew a dozen people, their murmurs about her antics fueling my resolve. She glared from her porch, her silence a sign of her growing unease. I distributed seeds, organized a cleanup day, and watched the project take root. My revenge was germinating, and she wouldn't see its full bloom until it overwhelmed her. The days after the ruined garden party were a whirlwind of activity and simmering tension. I woke each morning to the sight of my muddy garden, the trampled roses a stark reminder of Helen's spite, but also a catalyst for my resolve. The community garden project I'd initiated gained traction, drawing neighbors together in a way I hadn't anticipated. Helen's sprinkler fiasco had lit a spark, and I was determined to fan it into a flame she couldn't extinguish. My anger fueled my steps, but I kept my approach measured. My revenge would grow organically, beyond her grasp. The neighborhood association responded quickly to my complaint. Mrs. Patel called, her voice tinged with exasperation. Olivia, we've reviewed your evidence. Helen's sprinkler use violated the noise ordinance. We're issuing a warning, but you can escalate if it happens again. I thanked her, the validation boosting my confidence. I shared the update with the community garden group, a dozen neighbors gathered in my living room, their faces a mix of curiosity and support. Mark, my landscaper friend, brought soil samples to the meeting, confirming the fertilizer was a low-grade toxic mix. This could support a property damage claim, he said, his expertise adding weight to my case. Word of the incident spread. A local online forum buzzed with posts about Helen's antics, her loud late-night calls, her feud with the mailman over a misplaced package. My viral article had opened a floodgate, and neighbors began sharing their grievances. One, a retiree named Tom, recounted how she'd reported his dog for barking, though it was deaf. Another, a young mom, complained about her blocking the sidewalk with trash bins. The community's resentment was a resource I hadn't expected, and I encouraged them to document their experiences. We created a shared Google Doc, a digital ledger of her misdeeds, growing daily. I escalated my plan. The ivy along the fence thrived, its tendrils creeping toward her side, a silent invasion she'd soon notice. I also planted a row of fast-growing sunflowers along the boundary, their towering stalks a visual taunt she couldn't ignore. At the next community garden meeting, we decided to petition the association for a noise curfew, targeting Helen's habitual evening sprinkler use. The vote was unanimous, and I drafted the request, my handwriting steady despite the thrill of the strategy. Helen glared from her porch during the meeting, her silence a sign of her growing unease. Legal options took shape. I consulted a friend, Lisa, a paralegal, over coffee. "Olivia, you've got a case for intentional property damage," she said, reviewing my photos and soil samples. A small claims suit could force her to pay, but it might escalate tensions. I weighed the risk, deciding to hold off unless she struck again. My quieter revenge was gaining momentum. Lisa suggested a cease and desist letter, a formal warning to deter further incidents. I had it drafted, the legal jargon a shield I relished sending. Helen's retaliation came sooner than expected. One night, I heard a crash, my fountain, toppled and cracked, water pooling on the patio. I found her footprint in the mud, a bold move. I called the police, filing a report with photos and the footprint cast mark helped me make. The officer, sympathetic but cautious, promised a follow-up. I added this to the Google Doc, the community's outrage growing. At work, my editor noticed my focus, asking about the article's inspiration. I hinted at a personal story, and she suggested a follow-up piece on neighbor revenge, another platform to amplify my plan. The community garden flourished. We cleared a plot 2 streets over, planting tomatoes and herbs, a symbol of unity Helen couldn't touch. Neighbors brought tools, seeds, and stories, their laughter a balm to my wounds. Helen's isolation deepened, her porch remained empty, her curtains drawn. I sensed her watching, but she stayed silent, perhaps calculating her next move. My revenge was taking root, a network of support and strategy that would soon overshadow her control. The next step would be decisive, and she wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The weeks following the fountain incident brought a tense stillness, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional murmur from the community garden. I woke each day to the sight of my repaired fountain, its gentle trickle a symbol of my resilience, but my mind buzzed with the next move. Helen's footprint in the mud had shifted the game, and the neighborhood support was a weapon I intended to wield. My revenge was no longer just a personal vendetta, it had grown into a collective stand, and I was ready to push it further, though the outcome remained uncertain. The police follow-up came swiftly. An officer visited, reviewing my photos, the footprint cast, and the soil samples. "This looks intentional, Ms. Olivia," he said, his tone serious. "We can't prove it was Helen yet, but we'll question her. File a restraining order if it escalates." I nodded, grateful but cautious, adding the report to our Google document. The community garden group rallied, their outrage fueling a petition for stricter neighborhood rules. We gathered 50 signatures in a week, presenting it to Mrs. Patel, who promised a special meeting. Helen's isolation deepened, her porch stayed empty, her curtains a barrier to the world she'd alienated. The cease and desist letter arrived at her door, delivered by a courier I watched from my window. Her reaction was immediate, she stormed out, tearing it up, shouting about petty neighbors. I recorded the outburst with my phone, the audio crisp with her threats to make me pay. The video joined our evidence pile, strengthening my case. Lisa reviewed it, advising, this could justify a lawsuit or a police report for harassment. Your call. I opted for the latter, filing a complaint that prompted another officer visit. Helen's defiance only tightened the noose I was weaving. The community garden became our stronghold. We harvested the first tomatoes, their red glow a victory against Helen's spite. Neighbors brought picnic tables, turning it into a social hub, their laughter a stark contrast to her silence. I organized a cleanup day, clearing overgrown lots, and invited a local reporter to cover it. The article, "Neighbors Unite Against Discord," praised our efforts, subtly hinting at Helen's role. Her house seemed to shrink under the attention, her glare from the window a powerless snarl. The ivy and sunflowers along our fence thrived, their growth a daily reminder of my strategy. Helen's next move was reckless. One night, I heard a chainsaw, her cutting down the ivy on her side, but also damaging my trellis. I called the police again, documenting the destruction with timestamps and Mark's assessment of the repair cost, $300. The officer issued a citation, and the neighborhood association fined her $200 for property interference. Her frustration boiled over. She pounded on my door, yelling, "You'll regret this." I stayed inside, recording her tirade, the restraining order process now inevitable. The community support surged, offering to testify if needed. At work, my editor loved the neighbor feud angle, commissioning a series on community resilience. I wrote the first installment, masking my story but drawing parallels, and it drew thousands of views. Comments speculated about Helen, her notoriety spreading. I used the platform to promote the garden project, raising funds for a shed, another jab at her exclusion. My plan was blooming, a network of legal, social, and personal actions that Helen couldn't counter. The next phase would seal her fate, and she wouldn't see it until it overwhelmed her. The months following Helen's latest outburst brought a sense of closure, though the air still carried a hint of her lingering defiance. I woke each morning to the gentle rustle of my garden, now restored with new roses and a reinforced trellis, a testament to my perseverance. The restraining order was granted after her door-pounding incident, forcing her to keep her distance, her house a silent shell across the fence. My revenge had blossomed into a victory that outgrew her control, and I was ready to reap the rewards, though the final chapter was still unfolding. The legal pressure mounted. The police investigation concluded, citing Helen for vandalism and harassment based on the fountain and trellis damage. She faced a court date, and the neighborhood association upheld her $200 fine, adding a restriction on her sprinkler use. I attended the hearing, my evidence, photos, recordings, and witness statements, presented with calm precision. Helen's lawyer pushed a weak defense, blaming misunderstandings, but the judge wasn't swayed. She was ordered to pay $500 in damages and serve 100 hours of community service, a public humiliation that stripped her remaining pride. Her glare as she left the courtroom was impotent, a shadow of her former spite. The community garden thrived, becoming a local landmark. We built the shed with donated funds, its bright paint a beacon of unity. Neighbors hosted weekly potlucks, their laughter a stark contrast to Helen's isolation. The reporter returned, dubbing it the Garden of Resilience, and the story went regional, drawing volunteers. Helen's house remained dark, her curtains drawn, her presence fading. I planted a memorial rose bush in the garden, dedicating it to my rebuilt spirit, its blooms a quiet triumph. At work, my series on community resilience earned me a feature spot, boosting the magazine's readership. Comments praised my subtle storytelling, some guessing the neighbor's identity, further eroding Helen's standing. I donated part of my earnings to the garden project, funding a children's gardening club. My sister, Mia, joined as a volunteer, her pride in me a healing balm. I started dating again, meeting a kind gardener named Paul at the community plot, his gentle humor a new chapter. Reflecting, my revenge wasn't just about Helen, it was about reclaiming my peace. Her spite sowed the seeds of my strength, and my strategy, patience, community, and proof, reaped justice. One day, a note slipped under my door, Helen's handwriting apologizing, promising change. I kept it, unopened, a relic of her defeat. If you've faced a neighbor's wrath, this is for you. Share your story below. Subscribe to Revenge Tempest for more triumph tales, and hit the bell for updates. See you next time.